Hey, it's the Chief Bonding with Board Games. It's going to be a full review, all right, not going deep into gameplay, but of Ship of the Line Trafalgar 1805 from Trafalgar Books and Games. Did I get it? No, Trafalgar Editions, Games and Books. There you go. I love my books and my games. It's a simulation. You're going to have great toy factor with functionality. You lose a mast, you're going to be able to remove the mast from the ship, and that's going to affect your ability to move. So not only toy factor, not only is it great eye candy where it looks good, it's practical. With wooden ships, sailing ships, combat, here's what you're going to get in this game and what you should expect to get in this game. Movement by the wind is everything. There are basic, simple rules, but you don't even want to use them. Okay, you're going to want to use the wind. That's where the tactics of the sailing vessels come in. The different ways you can shoot at each other. That's what it's about. Do you want to use chain shot? You're trying to demast the other ships. Grape shot, you're trying to sweep that deck clean right before you board it. You can do that in here. Double shot, sure, you're in close. Let's do some massive damage to the hull. Even the hot shot, almost molten balls that were shot over to the other ships, and when they hit, they would catch the wooden vessels on fire. Hello, the ability to land one of those into somebody else's, another ship's munition storage thing, and boom, the whole vessel goes up, which happened. Yes, it happened in Trafalgar. I can't remember the name of the ship. So that's all here. Massive fleet engagements here. You can shrink it down and do little 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 2-on-3. Large, there's even a 4-decker, 3-decker. You get all the way down to the frigates and such. So it's all encapsulated in this game. That's enough of me telling you what's in it. Let me go show you some basics on how it works, and we'll come back out. All right, I wanted to open up tight with what the ships of the line actually look like when they're on the board. So you can see the dice. And over here, this is going to be our range marker, and you can see the modifiers for long distance. You can do grape shot. We're going to get into all that, but I wanted to show how beautiful these ships are. Now let me pan out just a little bit. All right, I'm panned out wide, so you can see the box cover art. Beautiful. Totally evokes that ship of the line. Battleship against battleship. The broadsides are at close range. So the question is, does the game evoke the same feeling as the cover? Yes. Now here's the deal. Trafalgar is a huge battle. Tons and tons of ships. So by calling, at least for me, by calling it Trafalgar 1805, you've got to have the ability to have all those ships down on the board and be playing. Now, I have not played the whole Battle of Trafalgar. There's a whole scenario set up in here. What I did is break some ships out. I've got, I think, 1 French ship, 2 Spanish, and 2 English, just to work on my movement mechanics, how they work in this game. I'll get into that, how combat works, and then some of the minutia. But before I go further, I want to show you. So you end up getting all of these different hulls. Now these are painted. You can see porthole, silver etchings. They have a little light wash to them. There's the sails that attach, and you can see these have a painting to them as well. These have not been fully affixed. I wanted to show you how they come, and then pose some of the questions of, I'm not sure if they're all painted or if I got a painted copy, because I also had these in here, which clearly are not painted, but the French, the English, and the Spanish. And I'm wondering if, I don't know, if these base colors under here, what are the base colors? So I wanted to spend some time, because this one's painted fully. Sorry. This one just has the touch of red. The sails all have kind of, the mast is painted, and then you have the sails, and then a little bit of like a wash to make them dirty. And then you actually have these little stickers where you can do your flags, your kind of unit flags that sit on the back. You got to watch these a little bit. They don't stick perfectly, but it allows you to pick up and move them around a little bit too. Now, something else to show. And Paul Camden, who's the gentleman that first contacted me in regards to this game anyway. He's from England. So, now they won't come out. This is good. All right, there we go. Putting these in, see if I can come up and show you. So they just fit in. Sorry about my hands, I've been working outside. So these literally fit into the holes down in here. Again, you can see some of the little painting artwork that's been done. However, I broke a couple masts putting them in. So a couple quick tips. When you're putting them in, don't push from the top. The way these sails are set up, you can literally push them from here and down. And then something Paul told me that was very effective. Let me pull it in from off camera. He goes, do you have any like hard tack, sticky tack that you use to put up posters? Well, yes, I do. He says you want to break off a little ball of that, and you want to drop that down in the hole, just a little ball, and it really helps hold these, because when I was playing, I would knock some of these masts off. Now, it's kind of good. There's a whole movement factor I'll get into where if you're dismasted, you can put out a counter, but I actually like just kind of laying the mast down or putting it down on the side that I've had my mast dismasted from. And so having these removed gives you all these visual clues on how far you can move. The sails, of course, just like in real life, the more sail you have up, the faster you move, the less speed you have. You can get fouled in your rigging. So being able to remove these is a great game component. So I want to bring in, these aren't just for looks, although they look gorgeous. They've got a function that tells you things about the game in play, simulation-wise, in regards to movement, which I'll get into in a second. But I wanted to cover that because that's really kind of what Trafalgar 1805 brings special. You've got the visual on-table representation of your ships. There are mats that I'm going to talk about in a second. But the toy factor isn't just, oh, they look pretty and they're neat. I almost glued these in because I was setting everything up before I even read the rules. And then I was like, oh, wait, you want to pop these out. It's much cooler to pop these out and be able to see, oh, he's had some damage to his rigging. So, neither here nor there, but if you're playing, and I won't put that back in right now, but a little bit of sticky tack down in the hole allows you to remove them as needed, but it keeps them from shifting around, because sometimes they'll shift around and then it even looks like they've taken damage, but they haven't. Especially my hands, I have these big hands. So I should have just asked Jose, but Jose Luengo from Spain is the owner. Jose, if you hopefully you can come in the comments and just or Paul, come in and just mention, are they always painted, or do they generally look like this and these were painted? I don't know, because there were literally only these three that were in the box, which would make it easy, but the painting of them just looks so much more realistic. All right, so enough of that, but I wanted to show you, so enough cards to represent all the different ships that were involved in Trafalgar. And of course that means you can create scenarios as well. You've got a turn tracking sheet, quite simple, and actually a very easy table sheet. Now this side is actually in Spanish, so you can see it's just one side. Everything everything deals with a die 6 or a couple different D6s. The other thing that I want to point out is, let me raise this up, I had to break out my plexi. You can see these are like 8.5 by 11 sheets of cardboard that are double-sided with, let me pull one out. All right, so a board is double-sided with the exact same kind of ocean scene. I'm going to make one reference here. I do wish maybe I had like a lighter colored Caribbean side or whatever. But here's what I'm going to say. You don't need this at all. There's no hexagonal movement, as you can see. The movement's all going to be controlled by your ship, how many sails you have up, if they're full sail or mid sail or light sail, and then you tracking that movement on the board. I will not use these again when I play. I will just, I'll get rid of the plexi and I'll just use the table I have. Okay, it's black, so what? There is no reason to actually use a board. So, and I'm going to say if a board is added in, although I know it's expensive, I prefer when they're all connected and you unfold them. These were jostling around so much that I finally went and broke out my plexi, which doesn't really even fit on this table. You can see where it's sticking over the side. But it was driving me crazy because I'd go to move a ship and I would bump one of these and they would all come up, you know, knocked off kilter, sorry. As you can see here, I'm not going to be able to get these in and that'll drive me crazy. So, the other thing I'll say is I have a dedicated board gaming table where the top lifts off, and I have a big polyurethane sheet under there with one side is a kind of a more of a typical blue, almost like the blue of the dice, and then the other side's this red. I would play this, if I didn't already have a game in progress under that table, I would have had this there, and that would have been my seafloor. So factor that in. I think they could save themselves a ton of money and forgo these boards at all and just really focus on the ships. All right, I wanted to show some of the counters before I get into the rules. Again, the rules are real simple, so we're going to move through that pretty quick. But these are counters for leaders. In the advanced rules, you're going to have the option of having leaders that can modify everything from how well the ship moves, to boarding parties, to training your guns, their accuracy. So the ability to actually see your potential commanders, I think Nelson right there. So having them there is just this, again, for a simulation, a very nice touch. Now I'm going to try to slide around just so you can get a view. The counter art's great. We got everything from heated shot, grape shot. I think there's double ball on the other side. Yep, so you can fire double ball. You're going to have to be at close range for that. Chain shot is in here. I think it's on the other side of the grape shot. Wounded, anchoring. You know, I'm actually going to tell you, I don't know what these are for. There's tons of them, and I haven't been able to find the rules. So either I missed it in the rules, but I wanted to point out, don't know what those are. All right, these are all your movement tokens. Sorry, you're picking up one of my can lights, which actually turned off. That's the plexi reflecting. So the movements markers are double-sided. What did come out interesting is you got blue on one side and red on the other, but they didn't quite line up perfectly. So again, this is my OCD coming through. So you can tell when you're doing the which side is supposed to be up. So I've just separated them out because I can't stand when they're off kilter. You'll see what I'm talking about if I grab these. So, and no big deal. Clearly they put them in case you're needing, and there's tons and tons of these movement markers because this is 1 UM, 1 unit of movement. And you can see your midline, and I'll get into showing how these work in just a second, but I wanted to show kind of how they are and how the function of them are. All right, we're going to get into actual gameplay, but I really wanted to show some of the details on the components, because that's what, for me, a simulation with sailing ships is really where the enjoyment is with the bling factor. Jose, the owner of the company, let me know, because in my unboxing, I talked about how the rule book just feels like a light, almost like a newspaper kind of feel. And there is color used, obviously, but there's not a whole lot of depictions or pictures of what's going on. Now, he did explain this is translated from Spanish, and that the Spanish translation, although it has a lot of diagrams, kind of like what this is here, that it was set up a little bit different from what the rules are if it had been in Spanish. All right, real quick, the game sequence, dirt simple. The first thing you do is determine initiative, so you roll off a die. Interesting, I got 6. They actually even use that in the example. If both sides were to roll a 6, the English player, whoever's playing the English side, wins ties. So if you roll the same number, or if you're both maxed out, the English wins the ties. After initiative is determined, you actually move to the first phase combat. Combat's going to be simultaneous. You're going to have the player with the initiative just goes first, and then the player without initiative, or the players without initiative, will go second. You can have multi people playing this game. I'll talk about that when we get into the advanced rules, especially with the actual Trafalgar scenario. Initiative doesn't matter at all when it comes to the combat phase, because you're both going to do your attacks, resolve them, and then when both those attacks are done is when you're going to actually resolve your damage. Then you're going to move to the second phase, which is movement. In this one, and it's key, of course, although it always seems unintuitive to me, maybe I'm slow, but it totally makes sense. The non-initiative player has to move first. So in this case, the Spanish ship would have to move first. The English have the initiative, so they're basically going to be able to adjust to what the other player does as far as movement. So you're going to move your Spanish player first. In this case, it's a Spanish ship, and then the English player is going to move. Then you're going to move to your third phase, which is called the crew phase. And if there has been any boarding, this is also the phase where you're going to check and see if there's been a capture of the ship. As a simulation, one of the things you're definitely looking forward to is the ability to close with a ship, rake it, grape shot it, chain shot it, double ball, whatever you're looking to do. And then if you're close enough, you can ram in this game. If you're close enough, you can grapple it, send over boarding parties, and you can take the ship with a skeleton crew, try to get it out of there as victory points. Now, the game's maximum length is 24 turns. Each turn represents approximately 15 minutes of real-life time. The designer goes in and explains in a portion of the rules where he considered, or his team considered, 6 hours as an absolute endurance limit for the crews, and that historically they were exhausted way before that ever came up. They then also add in that if you want a faster game in order to just resolve where your point scores are, you can cut it in half, shave it down to 12, and but then they say you want to double all of the damage that happens to the hull. We'll get into critical hits and all that here in a second. All right, showing combat. So the first thing is your field of fire is the broadside itself. So from point to point, and if I were to get down at a different angle, you can see the guns. That is your field of fire as it comes out. Now, just for aesthetic reasons, we'll put it right on the center of the broadside. This is just to show your range. So long range, immediate range, close range, and you'll be minusing a die off if you're in these different areas. So again, if with using the ship card I used, where it was a 6, it had 100 guns, and its die roll was 6. At this range, I would minus 1 of the die, and I would roll to see if I strike. Obviously 2 at long range, and then close range, it's no modifier, but then I can use a bunch of different, chain shot, grape shot, double ball. All right, so once you've determined your range, how many dice you're going to be rolling based on your ship and the range, you've got a simple deal here that just explains that you're going to hit on 5s and 6s, so 1s, 2s, 3s, it says it right in here, 1, 2, 3, and 4s are misses unless you've got point blank range or veterans. So you roll. So if I just kicked in and rolled, boom. All right off the bat, these are my hits. I don't have a veteran crew. Basically, I've got 2 5s. So as soon as I now come over here, now I'm going to roll again, and you can see it's going to be hull damage, or if I get a 6, possible critical damage. So we got a 4 and a 1, and it would just be hull damage, 2 hits to the hull. I'm going to show you my same ship card, but the ship, the Spanish ship that's being attacked, would just taken 2 hits to their hull. Now, again, real simple. That's what I'm saying. Combat here is not overly difficult. When we get into movement's not difficult, but that's where sailing games will get you. The critical damage table, you're going to come in if I'd had a crit. So if I'd rolled a 6, I'm going to roll again, and now you can see I've got mass falling to port, to starboard, so right or left. We've got a wounded or commander that's killed. Hits to the rudder. So you can track hits to your rudder, and you end up not being able to make way or make turns. You can have a fire started in your ship, or munitions. And you have all kinds of things where if munitions, like if that was a heated ball, it would cause an explosion. So different bad things can start happening if you get a critical hit. So in this example, first you would just resolve your combats. Both ships could fire on each other, no problem. You'd resolve both and then apply damages. So even though it's simultaneous, you're going to apply damages afterward. So that way if he lost guns or exploded or something, it's not like the combat didn't happen. Then you're going to move to your movement phase. Before I move on, I almost forgot, you can rake a vessel. So a raking of a vessel is just like what you see here. You've got a full broadside firing into either the stern or the bow of a vessel. And if that happens, which is what you want to happen if you're the one firing, you're going to be able to do a lot more damage. So when you're raking, if it's bow or stern, you're doubling the amount of your attack dice that you're rolling. So if it's 6, you're actually rolling 12. Now if you were attacking the rear, if you're doing a stern rake, so if this guy got raked, all right, along his stern, not only do you double the attack dice, so in this case, let's just say 6 up to 12, you're also going to double the resulting damage that happens. So if we got, 4 hits out of the deal, and let's just say all 4 of them were hull, you actually got 8 damage to the hull. In the combat phase, you also have potential boarding. So let me move this way so you can see. So in boarding, you've got to either be touching each other or at least half, you can see the little dotted line maybe there, at least half of a unit marker away from each other. And what that means is not that you automatically get to board. You can see you're pretty much on the same range anyway, but it means, and I'm knocking off, no, sorry. All right, and this is what I'm talking about. This is my fiddliness. You'll knock these out all the time. All right, whatever. He's lost one of his rigging. We'll get into that in movement. All right. They can now grapple, which is basically throw out grappling hooks and try to get the ships tied together. Let me even move in and at a different angle. All right, I've set the ships up close enough to grapple. Generally, you want touching. But if you see I've got a unit marker or movement marker out here, and you can see if you're half, which is the dotted line of a unit marker away, you can actually attempt, see if my big fingers can move this guy. So if it was something like this, even though they're not touching, they could still attempt a grapple. All right, and a grapple is interesting because when I was going through the rules, and I want to show you, it says consult the grappling table. And again, I know we're dealing with translations, but mooring, I actually worked on a ship right out of high school on the East Coast. So mooring is basically tying up or attaching or grappling. So mooring table has got to be the grappling table. That's how I've been playing. There are not a lot of different tables on here. So mooring and grappling is the same. Jose, if I'm totally wrong, make fun of me in the comments, but it's got to be. So first you're going to see, well, there's two things. One, do both ships want to grapple? That can be key later. I'll explain why. If they both want to grapple, it's automatic. They've thrown out grappling hooks, they've tied each other together, and they're going to try to board each other. If one of the parties does not want to grapple, there's going to be an attempt by the player that wants to grapple. I'm going to say grapple a lot. They're going to roll a 6-sided die. You can see if they get a 1 or 2, they're moored, which means they're tied up, they're connected. And you can see it's ineffective if they get a 3, 4, 5, or 6. If the grappling ship is successful, there is an attempt by the other one to basically cut those moorings, and they would roll on the exact same table. And so if they were grappled or moored, they could then roll, and if they get a 1 or 2, they'll be able to cut that grappling, and then they wouldn't be connected. Grappling is actually a very risky maneuver. Now I'm going to bring in the tables again because there's the matching table in the rules and there's the table, the boarding table here on the sheet. I do not like the boarding table on the sheet. This looks like the lesser greater than symbol maybe, but it's got the 2, 3, 4. It doesn't tell me how many dice to roll. What you do, well, let me get rid of that altogether. I'm going to show you with the rules show it clear in my opinion for the table. The first thing you're going to do is take the grappling, which is this number, the ratio, and figure out what the two ships have. So just for ease, all right, but it could be anything. Let's just say they're both a 3 or they're both a 4. That's 1 to 1, and you're then going to roll 2 dice. Thank you for printing that. That should have been on the table. I kept wondering, it feels like it should be because the number's up to 11. But here it states it, so it's nice. So the boarding parties, by the way, as soon as you're grappled, both sides can try to board now. Now, if the unwilling party that was trying to break the grapple has a successful boarding, what they show is that the lines are just cut because they weren't actually trying to make it on board. But let's assume they both wanted to board each other. It's a 1 to 1 ratio. You're going to roll 2 dice, and if you get a 2, 3, 4, or 5, you've successfully boarded. The other player then gets to try the same thing, and if they successfully board as well, the conflict basically continues, and you'll be dealing with that in the crew stage. There's only 3 results that can come from the boarding attempt. You can have the fact that no boarding successful or it was repelled, in which case they're still grappled and they're drifting, but there's no actual capturing going on. One side wins the grapple attempt, and the other one's unsuccessful in winning it, in which case the other ship is surrendered, or they're both still engaged in combat. They're both basically still in the midst of that engagement. They're both successful. So being boarded and not being successful in repelling that boarding attempt is one way you can get a ship that's surrendered, strikes its colors, white flag goes up. There's another way, let me grab this sheet. If you get into the sinking rating, so this is the damage to the hull, and you get into these like board or wooden background numbers, at the end of each turn you have to roll, and if you get a 1 or a 2, a ship could have to surrender at that point in time because they're sinking. You do have the option to try to get your crew to work on your ship, but that is one other way they can surrender or strike the colors. All right, we're opening up on what a movement looks like. Now, first of all, wooden ships sailed very slowly. So this was not like a modern day fleet where you just went where you wanted when you wanted to go there. As you can see here, I've got the British ship has lost their foremast. They still have their main mast and their mizzen mast, which is the one in the back. The first thing to simply equate is that the foremast gives you 1 unit movement. The main mast, or the center one, will give you 2. It's also usually a little taller. And the mizzen mast in the rear gave you 1. So this Spanish ship has 1, 2, 3, 4 unit movement markers. Missing the foremast here, this British ship only has 3. Now that again is the nice factor of how you can simply pull these masts off when they're damaged. It allows you to really show your movement. But as most people know, when you're playing a sailing game, the wind is what moved these fellows along. They have no other way to propel themselves. So knowing that the mast, and I'll touch on it later, there's also an advanced rule where you can have full sail, I think short sail, medium sail out, which gives you bonuses as well. Not going to talk about that now. But I'm going to pan up to the weather compass, or the compass. I don't know why I called it a weather compass. Because the other thing you're going to factor in on is that arrow showing the wind direction. So in this case, you can see it's out of the southeast. And it's blowing, so it's blowing at an angle to these vessels. Now that's its most advantageous form of movement. Now I think I'm either going to move my ships up right near this compass or I'll widen out my shot. But you're going to want to use these wind rules. That's really what sailing combat vessels are about. There is a caveat in the rules that says, hey, if you want real basic movement, don't use the wind. I'm telling you. Use the wind. That's really where the strategy. This is really a tactical game of maneuvering your ships with the wind into combat. Let me cut from this. I'm going to move the ships up by the compass. All right. One thing to point out too is movement. So you say, can these ships move or tack in different movements as they go? Yes. Now, if they move, let me do a 45 degree. Let's say there was a 45-degree movement at the end of this. That actually would cost an extra unit of movement. However, if it's less than 45, it's more subtle. All right, let's just say, I think that looks like that's probably about 30. Then it's free. So you might want to make a drastic 45-degree turn with your ship, but that's going to actually reduce your movement length by 1. It would literally take 1 unit of movement to pivot 45 degrees. Now there are some, again, special rules where if you dropped anchor, or you can move in place, you can kind of pivot a little more, but those actually have to do with like pulling out your rowboats basically and pushing your ship around. I'm not going to get into that here. We're going to keep it a little more basic. All right, let me bring in the rule book, which shows the compass real quick so I can show you the bonuses or negatives depending on your facing to the wind. All right, so the way we have it here is, imagine this is the rear or the stern of the ship. This is the bow of it. If the wind is coming up off of an angle, you're going to get the full 100% movement of your unit movements. You can see how it's reduced if it's directly from the stern, so you actually got better wind movement coming off the sides. It's how your sails work. 50% reduction on the sides, 25% up front, and a total 0 if you're sailing directly into the wind. Now, the way you're going to figure this is, so with this coming in at that angle, these guys have 100% of their unit movements, which again is based on their mass. So we know that this ship that has its foremast, its mainmast, and its mizzen, all right, forward, middle, and rear, it's going to have 4 UMs, 4 unit movement. And it gets 100% of that because of the angle of the wind. Now the British ship on the other side, he's lost his foremast, so he only has 3. This is their full movement. Now let's say the wind was actually directly from the east. So I've moved the arrow, you can barely see it, sorry, the wind's now directly from the east. They're actually going to only have 75% of their movement. So they're losing, sorry as I bumped the camera, they're losing a quarter of their movement. Now you always round up. So the British vessel would still have his 3 UMs. Now if it was coming out of the south or the north, you're going to be, that's 50%, you would cut it in half. So these vessels, he would be down to just 2. With him having the 3, cutting in half, still rounding up, you're going to see he's at there. He would have been at 1.5, but he rounds up. Now, if you move it around where you're coming out of, like the northwest, now you're at 25%. I'm not going to keep jumping in and moving these, but you can, well, yeah, I am. Here, we'll just pull in, boom. And if you're going head into the wind, you're at 0. Now you do have inertia, so if you had just tacked into that position, you're still going to end up, the wind or the motion of your vessel is going to force you. Sometimes you actually want to stop, and your inertia will carry you 1 more unit movement, at the next round, or if you go right into the wind, it's going to still carry you with that inertia. If for some reason a ship is dead in the water, they're grappled up or whatever, they will actually drift 1 UM with the wind. So these vessels, if they were grappled together, would actually start drifting backwards with the wind. There are some advanced rules that allow the wind to shift around, not radically, because the wind wouldn't usually shift radically, but just know that's in there as well, and you really want to play with those because that's what throws a little kink in your plan. You've got the perfect tack, you're moving in, you've got the initiative, and all of a sudden the wind shifts a little bit, and you're like, whoa, this just changed everything. So, but there's some more advanced movement that I'll touch on later. That's really the gist of it. You got to know your sails give you your unit movement, and then the wind, the angle of the wind adjusts that speed or that unit movement. All right, I wanted to open up with a nice little stern rake that the Spaniards are getting ready to put on the English there. And I'm going to breeze through just a few quick things on the advanced rules. You do have the option for leaders, admirals, officers on your ship. They're basically going to give modifiers for everything from operating your guns to your movement of your vessel to boarding. You've got a cool thing that only the Spanish can do, which is nailing the colors. They literally like nailed it to the mast, and they would not surrender. It gives you kind of a fanatical feel to it. Just to touch on a few things, you do have friendly fire possibility if you get another ship kind of in your way. You've got collision checks are a big factor. And again, in my opinion, you want to add all these in. You want to go the full simulation when you're playing any kind of giant sailing ship of the line game. Communications and signaling, this game multi-plays so well. If you've got the full combat Trafalgar ships out there, the actual negotiating between ships is key. They've got rules that show you how to handle that. The leaders come into place on that in terms of the authority they can exert, which again, back in the day, they used with throwing flags up to give commands to subordinates in the area. Veteran crews, they don't fatigue as easily, a little bit better on the guns. There's some additional movement rules. This is key. All right, you can use low sail, which gives you the 4 UMs if you've got all of your foremast, your mainmast, and your mizzenmast. You're still going to have the 1-to-1 ratio. But if you have mid-sail, now you're going to get 5 unit movements, which is a 1-3-1. So again, that main extra top sail you could put on your main mast, or full sail, which is 7 unit movements, and a 2-3-2. And again, I keep giving you the ratio because if you lose a mast, you got to pull that off there. But it allows you to lose, like the British lost their foremast, but they can move to full sail, and they could basically pick up some extra unit movements off of their surviving masts, if that makes sense. Your crews get into everything from flood control to extinguishing the fires, transferring crews between ships so that you can man other ships that have been captured, maybe even fight with them. They have a whole different boarding rule system that I won't get into. And it deals with fatigue levels and all kinds of things, so you can really sink into the minutia. They even get into harbors and coastal batteries and how the guns work differently, and how you can attack them. So if you wanted to even work in that element, that's there as well. I'm going to pull out, I think, again, the key thing in any sailing game is the movement, but you've got the minutia of everything else going on here as well. All right, so you've seen the movement, basics on boarding, basics on combat. Nothing's really brain burner here. I would say the hardest thing, or the more difficult thing to wrap your head around, is always movement when it comes to sailing vessels. The angle of the wind. When I get new players in, my son or whoever, the first thing to explain that the wind directly off your stern is not as good as at a 45-degree angle, really catching and filling those sails. But then it's real intuitive to realize you're sailing with a wind-powered vessel into the wind. Not very good, not very efficient. Yes, there's some tricks you can do, pitching back and forth. That's in here. That's the hardest thing, or the most difficult thing to get the grasp of. And in game, I have been known, maybe I'm just dumb, I'll be in game and I'll make a move thinking I'm somehow taking advantage of the wind, and I'm not. So you've got to really watch your compass and that wind in there. Also, the advanced rule where the wind can shift slightly, not dramatically, but slightly. You got to have it in. You got to have in all the different grape shot, double shot, chain shot. All that should be in your game. I'm just telling you, that's what really makes it fun. The boarding in here, I'm telling you, having played, when you board, it's a risky venture. I'd rather just pound on them from afar and try to sink them, quite honestly. But if you want to catch a prize, you're going to need to board it. So you can come in, maybe they're dismasted, their crew's weak, you sweep in, just board them, no big deal, and you're off and running. But it's a risky venture, which it should be. Die rolls are simple. The ship cards are great. Sometimes I mentioned in detail that I had to kind of puzzle what was what. What's crew morale. I don't know. It's pretty basic on the line, but I had to sit and kind of puzzle through as I was reading it. Give me a splash page. Just give me a splash page. And then number it all off. Boom, 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 boom. Academy Games does it. And if they're looking, I'm telling you, you can't beat the splash page. The one-page chart rules, simple. Tells you right from the get-go when you break it out. Actually, it's two-pager, and I thought, oh, okay, there's some more. Nope, Spanish. So the rules are simple. I did run into the mooring versus the boarding thing. You've seen that, all right? The shot locator, great. I have seen some games use the broadside. The angle of the broadside is sometimes shrunken based on the type of ship you're fighting. Really, with these types of ranges, it doesn't matter. So the width of your broadside is your angle for your fire. Attach it on. Check and see. The only time you get into some weird conflicts is if you've got a friendly vessel kind of in the way. And in the advanced rules, they've got a way to sort that out. Not a big deal. I always put myself in the battle at the time. These weren't the most accurate pieces, so if a friendly ship's shielding another ship, just telling you, you're not firing rifled cannons here. So, but the rules are in there. The rules got it. So it all comes down to fun factor. What's nice here too is this scales way up. You can have individuals running multiple ships. I can't remember, 32. Let me look at the back. I don't even remember. I used to know. The number of vessels, French, Spanish, and English vessels that were involved in the Battle of Trafalgar is huge. If you can play the full Battle of Trafalgar, which you can do with this, it's designed to do with this. The scenario rules are all about Trafalgar. You can play that. You can play anything. You can play anything. So it's going to allow you the full scope of the Napoleonic wooden vessels combat scenarios. You may be making them up on your own, but that's fine. I think that's about it. The fun factors there. I like the ships. Those are my only questions for Jose. These are painted. So if he's got a company painting these for him when they come out, beautiful. It's nothing, top of the line, but it's gorgeous for what you need. This size ship. These aren't these bigger ones that you get from, I'm blanking on the other sailing vessel game. The popping in and out of the mast. Do use what Paul Camden gave me the tip on, which is the sticky tack. Put that in there, save you a lot of heartache. I even broke a couple masts trying to push from the top. Don't do that. These masts are perfect to push on the sails down lower. And by the way, when I broke it, I saved it because if I shorten I love the advanced rules of full sail and all that, and I can still use those to visually look like I want it to look. My big fingers sometimes were knocking these guys down, knocking the mass out. The sticky tack comes in helpful there. Like I said, there was one point I felt like, man, I should just glue these in and use a counter to show or something. But it's not as fun. It's way cooler when you lose a mast and you can automatically see it. And it's so crucial in your movement. The foremast is one, The main mast is 2 in the basic rules, and the mizzen mast is 1. And then how much sail you have on them modifies that. Pretty much enough said. If you enjoy wooden ships and the combat of that era in the vessels, I think this is a wonderful simulation. My only, and it's not on the translation at all. All right, I know the guy that did the translation. Translation's good. What I'm talking about when I mentioned that I would like more things in the rules, and I don't know, maybe they are in the Spanish version of the rules, is tons and tons of breakout pictures. Just tons. The splash page showing me everything on here and what they do. Close shots of, hey, this is your, you're moving your unit movements, and this is what this is, and then bam, they've got some little pictures in here and areas and stuff like this. If you can see that, I want more of that, much more of that. You can display so many things so easily with pictures. That's my only gripe at all. As I'm reading through, I would be sitting there thinking, okay, I think I understand this. And then as soon as I got my ships out on the board and I started to play through whatever I maybe had a question with, it was easy, no brainer. Most of this doing with movement and drift and all these things. So that's my only deals on the English rule book. I wish it was illustrated to the hilt. It's a little sparse on its illustration. Translation's great. Give me more illustration, Jose. More illustration. Again, the game was, this is a review copy sent over from Spain. I love it. I've never even seen this on the shelves here, so I appreciate the work that went into the translation, the beautiful work of the ships, and the cards. I think that's about it. Chief, bonding with board games. Watch out. I'm sending over some fire hot shot, and then I'm going to sweep the deck with some tiny little balls, grape shot. We're just going to sweep your deck clear, then I'm grappling and boarding. That's what I do. I'm a boarder. I love to board and take your vessel. If you play with me, that's what's going to happen. Even at my own risk, I'm coming in. Some double shot first. All right. Chief, see you guys later.